Hey everyone, it's Maydad here from 𝒂𝒐 Health and Wellness, and tonight I'm joined by Nadia Barkos from Chill Technology. How are you doing, Nadia?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm excellent. It's great to see you. And we've also got a special guest, a good friend of mine, Simon Mitchell. Simon Mitchell is a family constellation facilitator who's at his own boxing gym called White Collar Boxing for 15 years on the Northern Beaches. How are you, Simon? And great to see you too.
Great to see you tonight, Maydad. Yeah, I'm doing well. Pretty chilled out tonight and relaxed. I'm sitting in my motorhome and excited about talking to you and the audience tonight to see what we just to be present, to see what I can share from my life experience with you guys. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. I know you've probably got a lot to share tonight. I'd really like to find out, maybe you could share with some of the audience a little bit about your journey and what got you here.
Look, my journey started well, I've always been a really open human being, a very open human being my whole life. But my journey started in, I guess, understanding the dysfunction of families and into recovery when my marriage broke down when I was 30 years old. So I got married at 28. We broke up 18 months later. That rocked my world. It was a rock bottom for me, and I really didn't understand why did my dream shatter like it did. And that was the point where I went to a place called 𝒊𝒏 Private Hospital, and I learned about codependency. I learned about family roles, or I guess children's roles in family, or people's each individual in the family, they all carried specific roles. I learned how we can squash our feelings and it carried feelings. So if our parents don't carry their feelings, they can pass them on to their children, and the children will act them out. Yeah, so that was the start of my journey. When that relationship broke down, that was when I was like, okay, this all fell apart. What do I do now? And I was pretty lost. So yeah, that's what brought me into recovery.
It's amazing. It's incredible how we're all on a different journey, and one journey leads to another journey, and just the growth and the kind of the commitment they have to embody to to grow from it and learn from it. It's and thank you for sharing. I know Nadia has been dying to ask you a question. I'll let her ask you a question before I've got a few more questions I want to ask you, Simon.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a whole list of questions, and we want to try and extract everything we can while we're in session tonight. And I think there's a lot of dysfunction. Like you mentioned that there's a lot of codependency, like children not being aware of their space. And I'm sorry to hear that you had to learn a lot of this in rehab. But what made you decide to come into this line of work and delve deep?
As we said at the beginning, so basically I've done my work for over 22 years now on myself, and that's just a continuing. I don't think we've ever done the work. I think the work's a continuing process. We only ever have today, and we're only ever dealing with today's problems. Doesn't matter what we've done in the past. Hopefully what we've done in the past will give us some tools that we can use to deal with the present moment. But the present moment is always presenting its present challenges. And I think ask that question again, because I think I was got a bit sidetracked there. So say it again.
You have a bit of oh shiny moment as well. So what made you decide to come into this?
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that's right. So I've done my own work, and then I own White Collar Boxing, the gym, and dealing with a lot of children, actually people from all walks of life. So they would be, I'd be working with people physically with boxing, but really most people would be coming for issues. And most kids that come into the gym, into a boxing gym, are generally they're good kids, but they're kind of like looking for direction. A lot of kids are from single parent families, or families where mum and dad are both working to provide an income for the household to pay the bills, especially on the Northern Beaches being so expensive. So these kids, even though they have both parents, none of them are actually present at home. So they're coming to the gym, they think, to box or to learn to box, but really they're coming to build their self-esteem, to have a place of belonging, to looking for direction. And that was with the kids. And I found what I saw, having to help like, I mean, one of the kids that I used to train, when he first came into the gym, he was 8 years old. He was getting beaten up by his brother, and he couldn't speak. He had no voice. Like, he could speak, but when he spoke, it was like a whisper. And coming to the gym and helping him physically, but also uh, emotionally and spiritually and mentally, because what I encouraged in the gym was to give kids a voice. So it's contrary to school. In school, you're taught, if you ask questions, you're stupid. But if we knew everything, we wouldn't, we wouldn't need to go to school. But in my boxing school, I encouraged the kids to, firstly, there's no shame in asking a question. So no one was allowed to ever ridicule a child that was asking a question, because I was the opposite. If you ask questions, you're smart, because you're saying, I don't know. And when you say, I don't know, you're open to learning, and therefore everybody gets a chance to learn and to grow. And that was like with the kids. And I saw the kids blossom in this environment where at school they were put down. And a lot of adults, I helped a lot of adults through my experience, going through divorce, grief and loss, through losing loved ones to death. A lot of people had, just so many different issues, that really the gym was not a training, a boxing gym. It really was a mental health. It was a hospital in a sense. Really, people come to talk, and they're using fitness and to get well, but also that they have a place where they could share and belong to. And I help a lot of people, guide them to into recovery as well. So that's what brought me here. I decided after I closed the gym, because the COVID madness, basically what happened was, when we had the first lockdown, I didn't prepare properly to come back. I was all very new. I didn't really prepare properly for the comeback. It was a big gym. I'd lost key staff members because of it. And I was coming back to a gym where I was going to have to run it all by myself, and it was just too overwhelming. And so I decided to close the gym. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever made. It's been a huge loss in my life, but also it was a necessary thing for me to start to grow to something outside of boxing and to pivot to something else, because my whole life was boxing and I enjoyed the emotional side and connecting to people in this manner. So that's why I pivoted now to family constellations. It just seems like a natural progression, and I can still use my other tools that I've got to help people, but this is just something I really like, and it's something that's incredibly powerful. Yeah.
Help people. I think I studied, well, I didn't study, I trained in jiu-jitsu. And one of the first things my sensei said was, it's not about the body, it's about how the body and the mind and the spirit actually connect. And I think it's probably the same with boxing. I've got yourself and my dad both, mentoring youth especially. It just opens my eyes to so many opportunities where kids can actually get what they need. So thank you for your service.
It's really cool, Simon. When you talk about environment, because I can share that, as I think that's how we know each other, through the boxing circle. You had a boxing gym, and I've got mine. I'm going on to 16 years this September. But when we have these young kids, young adults coming in, and they're troubled, or they think the situations are not in peace and harmony at home, and they're troubled in somewhat, they come to a place like ours, and we provide them with such a great environment to just express themselves and just become more comfortable with who they are, and evolve through that. So that was a great to listen to what you have to share. I wanted to ask you what you believe are some of the signs that our families might benefit from, that you see from a professional intervention, and when should they seek help?
So when should a family seek help, and when should they? Is that what you're saying? When should a family seek help? When should they intervention?
Obviously, there's signs are pop up. What sort of signs do you see pop up in families that are going through turbulent times, and what benefits could they benefit from some professional interventions, such as the stuff that we're talking about tonight? When should they seek some help?
Yeah, look, family constellations is generally done not as a family. It's done as an individual. So basically, people will come when, you know, when they've heard about the modality and they're seeking support or help to understand why they do what they do, and to understand what they've gone through. Because the interesting thing about family constellations is it reveals the hidden truth underneath things. So, like in our family systems, we all have a narrative. So my family is this, they do this. So my mum does this, my dad does this, my brother does this, my sister does this, and they act in this. And we get used to patterns of our families. And then we start to label those. And then we get used to our own pattern. I do this, and we start to label that. And then, well, kids do especially because they're egocentric. So, for example, mum or dad or mum and dad aren't available because they're working so much. So a child has to adapt. Yeah. Now, a child has to adapt, and they don't really understand, especially a young child, because all they have is their will. They don't have the experience of life that as an adult we do. So mum and dad aren't available at home like they need to be for their child because they're working. So the child feels emotionally abandoned. But instead of understanding that mum and dad's at work, well, and there's, you know, they've got to go to work, the child thinks there's something wrong with me. Mum and dad don't love me. So right there's an adaptation in the child, that because the child can't separate themselves from what's happening, they've got two core beliefs that happen straight away. That is, there's something wrong with me and I'm unloved. And there's really the two common denominators, that the common belief systems that most people really have running underneath. They're the two biggest ones. I'm unlovable and I'm not good enough. And that's generally through a whole bunch of circumstances, whatever they may be. And mum and dad may be great parents doing their best, but they're human beings. That's the other thing you've got to understand. It's not about mum and dad being good and bad and labeling, but it's about mum and dad being human beings doing what they have to do to survive in this world. And unless mum and dad have been taught healthy boundaries and taught healthy family systems and how to communicate, that it's not your fault, this is what mum and dad are doing, and they're reassuring and they can kind of work through that stuff. And most of us, to be honest, have never had that kind of teaching. We have had to go through the pain of life, and the pain of life brings us back into recovery, where we're learning about what being a healthy adult is all about. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, look,
generally,
sorry. Keep going. No, I was just saying, I was just listening to what you're saying. I was kind of taking a moment to reflect on my own childhood memories and growing up and that. And I was doing it the other day, just at home. I was just journaling and stuff like that. And something came up and I was reflecting. And I believe I had amazing parents. My mum's no longer alive, but whenever she was around, she always gave the best of herself. The house was always clean. The fridge was always full. We were all fed healthy, home-cooked meals, all clothed right, etc. But I look at my childhood needs that weren't met, and I tend to understand that so much better now as an adult and somebody that's doing the work that I'm doing, so I can really relate to what you shared,
Yeah. And also, it's like, because mum and dad are our gods, when we have to admit, if we most of us won't ever admit that mum and dad did something wrong, because, imagine we've got to shatter the illusion that our parents are these perfect creatures and they did everything right and they did their best that they could, but we've got to also acknowledge the impact that our parents have had, and our school and teachers and certain people with positions of authority in our life. We have to acknowledge all of that stuff and that influence on us, but especially parents, because they're the people that provide for us and are supposed to be our teachers, and so they're the biggest influence that we have in our life. So it's really important that we have to kind of get out of our own way without blaming them. So it's not a betrayal to say, I love mum and dad, they did their best, but this is how this behavior affected me, and this is what belief system I created through
as a result
experience. Yeah, exactly.
Nadia and I did a Zoom session a while back. I forget who it was with, but we talked about a book came up that I read. It was with Dr. Morris Miller, and he talked about the 3 stages of human development. And when I hear you speaking about mum and dad being our gods, our role models, and the people that we look up to most. The first stage is the imprint period, which the Irish talk about. If you've got a kid for 3 years, you've got them for life. You've got them for 5 years, you've got them for life, or something like that. And it really is, because that is the age from 1 to 7 where you really, the child really looks up to their mum and dad, and they're the people that they emulate and just follow through. And then obviously you've got your second stage, which is, development period, and then you've got your socializing period, etc. But by the time you get to the socializing periods, young people, young adults are able to make their own decisions whether they want to be academically minded, or they want to be, or they work in a computer field, or whether they want to be sports athletes, or they make their own decisions whether they want to continue on living a certain way and following a certain religion and all their personal beliefs in that. But it really does. It's really, I like I said the other day, I sat down and I reflected on my childhood growing up and my childhood needs not being met, and how embedded that my mum and dad had their message was inside of me, and it still is.
Mm. Yeah. Awesome. Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So, mum and dad were great, yeah?
Amazing, yeah.
Good. But they weren't perfect.
Not at all. But I'm not perfect
good.
either.
So what would you be? So what would have been one of the negative impacts in your life from there?
I think of them. I think there was a lot of childhood needs that weren't met for me, in the social scene, in not being not. One of the things was, and it sounded a bit vain. I never had the things that other kids had.
Right.
They didn't have the ability to give me the other things that the kids had. Other kids would have a barbecue and they go down the beach. Mum and dad wouldn't come with me. They'd probably be working, or, their parents were in the scene and all that. My parents weren't, because they couldn't really speak English. And then I always felt like the dark horse, or the kid on the side, and that, even though I had probably more ability than most kids with sports and stuff like that, I felt there was a lot of childhood needs where, like, I never received pocket money like other kids did, and just things like that.
Mm.
But,
And what's when a child is experiencing that? When you're a kid, what were some of the belief systems that you created around mum and dad not coming and seeing you at sport, not giving you pocket money? And they were probably doing their best, like I said, but what was the thoughts that you created?
there was not the connection could have been a lot better. The connection, the communication, the connection.
But what did you make up about yourself? Let me ask you even more personal question. So let's take it internally now. What did you make up about yourself?
What do I make about myself? I made about myself that perhaps I'm not good enough, maybe.
Yeah.
Perhaps I'm not important.
Mm.
And that's what I see with kids that come to my gym. Perhaps I'm not worthy, or I'm just complaining and I should just shut up and just let it be. And it wasn't until I got a little older that I realized, and as a father, as a parent right now, I'm really learning it and understanding it so much better.
Yes. And it's really great to hear you be so vulnerable. I'm just turning on my heater because it was a bit cold. Sorry about that. But it's really great to hear you say that, because the truth is, even though your parents were working hard and they wanted to be there for you, but they couldn't provide. They couldn't give you the pocket money. They couldn't be there, but yet that's the adaptation I'm talking about. So even though our parents were good parents and they did the best they could, and that's why it's not about blaming, but it's about acknowledging that experience in our lives. That's all it is. And then what family systems gets to do, because quite often people get into a sense of blame. My parents were like this, and my parents did this and they did that, and which is true, but they never really understand why their parents did that. And so I guess when you come into a thing like family constellations, you get to, because it's not talk therapy. Family constellations is not talk therapy. It's about energy. It's about the field, and people take on the representation of members of your family, and you start to experience your family members and see them as they are. Maybe dad was incapable of showing emotion. Maybe mum was so stressed she wasn't able to be present. and you start to see them in this different light of these perfect godlike creatures which we think they are when we're growing up, and the expectations we have. And so what it does, it starts to unravel the very nature of how we see them and then the world around us. We start to be more compassionate and understanding on our parents and also ourselves. Yeah. So
It's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Like, you get to a certain age and you realize what issues mum and dad had. Like, my dad had no dad. His mum was blind, and he went through traumatic time growing up. And I look at my childhood in Israel growing up in the Middle East, and it's so much harder than it is living in Bondi. Bondi is like a fairy tale coming in,
Yeah.
And just the older I got, the more I realized how much trauma my mum and dad had been through, going to war, all kinds of stuff, and yeah, it's just made me realize my role as a parent and how vulnerable I am and how vulnerable the kids can be, and
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully, I was going to say, the other part of that is, once you realize that, the compassion that you start to give yourself and others around you, I imagine.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
I'm like literally holding back the happy tears that I'm not the only person that's experienced all of this. And I guess one thing that I just listening to both of you, I don't have kids, and I'd love to have kids, but my body just doesn't can't handle it. So I've accepted that as a very young adult. And
Yeah.
so I see other kids, and as a therapist and working with a lot of kids, and I see that they are making up stories based on, things that aren't true. Like they're watching TV, they're watching social media, they're watching social networking. Like, parents are working all the time now, so
Yeah.
they're being raised by school systems and childcare.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
The iPad.
yeah, the iPad. Yeah, so in the 80s when we were kids, it was TV that was the babysitter. But Tom and Jerry were cat and mouse.
Disney. Yep.
We've got lots of animals.
I think you're a bit younger than I am. I mean, I remember, for me, the greatest thing that I had was, I lived in a cul-de-sac, and actually even before we had TV, but what still wasn't the main thing. I had the old BMX bikes, and we used to have the BMX jumps across the road. We'd all be out riding our bikes, jumping our pushies and riding skateboards. Me, maybe not skateboards. I used to fall on my bum too much, but riding skateboards and going bush, and that was my childhood. It was all outside. Now it's all inside, completely opposite, like you said. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's so different, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I was talking to my mum actually this morning, and she was saying how upset she was that my grandmother, she was half blind, diabetic. She couldn't really look after us kids, and she would bend over backwards just to have somebody else take us to the kids. But now it's like we're so wedged into that. I'm watching. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 devices right now, and I work in different. But kids have that.
Yeah.
They're fully disconnected from the environment of guidance, and they don't like to be told not to do something or how to do something as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get really excited when my 2-year-old godson comes in and he goes, Lala, let's play grounds. I'm like, yes, one of the kids is going to get his bum dirty today. Oh dear. Anyway, I'm going to continue on and ask my next question if you don't mind.
Perfect.
So, seeing as children are egocentric, adults are busy making a life for us kids. How to manage those little conflicts with kids, adults, family members, outside members? How can we manage those conflicts within family situations?
Right. That's a great question. And how do we manage conflict? I think first and foremost is, what language are we speaking? what language do we speak? So if I'm speaking the language of blame, and you got to think about what are some of the first things that you might say, and think about this yourself, Nadia and Maydad. Something happens to you, and you feel an emotion. And what's the first words that come out? Is "you made me." You know, the first three words. What do those first three words say? You're responsible. You did this.
Yeah.
And so if I was to say to you, where are your feelings felt? Where are they felt? Where do you feel them, Nadia? Where do you feel your feelings?
There.
Yeah, in you. So is the other person feeling your feelings?
No.
No. So I feel my feelings. They're created within me, and what creates those feelings? Like it sounds like a really simple idea, but that our thoughts create our feelings. But it's even further, more deeper than just our thoughts. It's our belief systems that basically create our feelings, because I can't create my thoughts. And if I don't know what my belief systems are, like that I'm not lovable, I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, which I said to you is I haven't met anybody that doesn't have it running at some level, which is I'm not good enough, I'm unlovable, you know. But if we're not aware of that's what's driving our responses to conflict, then we cannot ever resolve them. Basically what we do is we blame the other person, we get huff and puff, we get angry, and then it gets swept under the carpet. So first things we need to do is we need to learn a new language, which is responsibility, self-responsibility. We need to understand what's going on the inside for us. So when somebody says something, instead of "you made me," it says, "when you said this, I felt this, and what I made up about myself is this." For example, when you said I was ugly, I felt angry. And what I made up about myself is that I'm unlovable, right? All you said is that I'm ugly. It doesn't matter what you believe, really. It matters what I believe. But if I believe that I'm ugly and you trigger that I'm ugly, then I'm going to dislike you a lot, aren't I? I'm going to blame you for making me feel, right? But if you go, "Simon, you're ugly," and I go, "Oh, I don't really believe I'm ugly," I might even laugh. I might go, "Nadia, when you said I was ugly, I feel joy actually, and what I make up about myself is that I am a beautiful and lovely human being. You know, so it's all about the frame in which we carry ourselves. And once we started to do the work of breaking down those core belief systems, we can start to see and interact in the world with people very differently. And then when they're in blame, when they're blaming us, we can also see that as well. Yeah, and have compassion. Yeah.
I think I'm going to have to steal that one. Like, I just wrote down the template, and I've been writing down all these notes as well.
Yeah, so it's called, okay, so basically what that is, it's called a level. I learned that at South Pacific Private Hospital 22 years ago. It says, when I experience you, when I hear you, when I experience you, when I see you doing, saying, being, blah, 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 what I make up about myself is that I'm not good enough. I'm unlovable. I'm stupid. Yeah. And what I feel is shame and guilt or pain or fear or anger. And most people, when you're speaking this language to somebody that can't speak it, will get really angry generally, actually. Like, what do you mean? They don't know how to deal with it because we're so used to the blame game. Yeah. They actually don't know how to deal with it. But you're not doing this kind of level for them. What you're trying to do is you're trying to be intimate and express your inner self. And what that does, it creates intimacy and it creates trust over time. At first, you're speaking Greek, they're speaking Italian. You can't even, to most people, it doesn't matter. There's a simpler version, and there's a couple of other things. So that's when you maybe want to do something when you want to talk to somebody who's probably a bit more intimate in your life. But there's some other really good things, which is just boundaries. It's like, stop, no, enough. I don't like that.
Yeah. Boundaries. Yeah. In my 43 years, I'm only just learning about boundaries now. And nephews, that are 10 years and below, like that was my driver to learn more about, no, that does not sit well with me.
Yeah.
Yes, let's go out and play and get our bums dirty. Like, the level, boundaries.
Yeah.
Just do this right now, but I still love you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right. I actually wrote extensive notes on this little part, and I might, when I do snippet through this video recording, I might actually make that as a template if you can check me on that as well. Because I think that's so valuable that learn the right thing about their beliefs, and sort of like the NLP language of cause and effect. It's like, what did I?
I really like NLP. But I do believe it's a bit of a two-step process, which means it's just a start and a finish. And I think this stuff is the middle ground.
Yeah.
But I also, do you want to hear? I don't know if you're interested, but do you want to hear another two statements that both they're really two principles which I live my life by, which is an internal boundary statement and an external boundary statement.
Yeah.
And again, I went to rehab 22 years ago. So the internal boundary statement, so this is about me. So the internal boundary statement is about my feelings and my emotions. So it says, I create what I think and feel, and I am in control of what I do and do not do, and the same is true for you. So I create what I think and what I feel, and I am in control of what I do and do not do, and the same is true for you. So I'm responsible and I create. Yeah. Now, the external boundary statement, which is a bit different. So this is about how somebody can touch us or how close they can come to us. So it's a bit different. So this is the external world. That one, the first one's the internal. This is the external. So the external world is I control who, how, where, and when, and the minimum distance I may be touched, and the same is true for you. So I control who touches me, how they touch me, when they touch me, how close they come to me. And so that's the minimum distance stuff. And the same is true for you. You see people that come up in your face and keep walking up, and you'd feel embarrassed to walk away. That's a boundary violation that they're creating, and you're the accomplice to it because you haven't said no. So basically, our boundaries get violated as we're growing up in the adaptation phase. So we have the wounded child, which is the weak and vulnerable, the too vulnerable child that's kind of like all emotion, which you see kids and people fall apart completely under stress. And that's the not good enough child. That's the wounded child. And then the other part is the adapted child. And this model is taken from Pia Mellody. So the adapted adult, or the basically the rebellious teenager. So it's the adapted adult child, which is better than, it's invulnerable, has walls up. It's not boundaries, it's walls. They know everything, can't tell them anything. And you see that opposite all the time, and quite often people will go from the wounded child to the adapted child because the adapted child protects them from feeling less than. And so really that's what's going on for them. So the adapted child has this less than, I'm not good enough running underneath, but to protect themselves, they've got to portray or project an image that they're better than everyone else because they really feel deep down that they're not good enough. Yeah.
That's actually an eye-opening that we all need to be reminded of it sometimes too.
Sure do. Couldn't agree more. Simon, despite the family's, parents' busy schedules and individual pursuits, going to work, paying bills, running around, as most parents do, how do you feel families can strengthen their bonds together?
Okay, it's a great question. I think I have this. The first thing that I get people to do is what's called 5 minutes of uninterrupted sharing per person, per family member. So if there's 6 people, it's 6 by 5 minutes. If there's whatever it is, and it can even, when you're first starting out, it could be 3 minutes. But I actually recommend starting out at 5 minutes because you got to get used to being silent as well. the uncomfortability. And in this, what's called uninterrupted sharing, there's some rules. So each person gets to share about whatever they want to in whatever way they want to, and everyone else has to keep their mouth shut.
I can see my nephew being like,
Yeah.
God, yeah.
And no one can comment on their share in that share. So, for example, if I'm talking about my day and all the feelings I have towards Nadia and Dad, when it's your turn to share, you can't mention my share. You can only share your feelings about things. Oh, yeah. So we've got to really, and it's the other. So no one can interrupt my share. No one can comment and say you were wrong. I disagree. My reality is my reality. That's one of the biggest boundary violations as well. So someone will share in a family system that, this is what happened to me, and someone will go, no, you didn't. Yeah. That's called gaslighting, and that's how people start to doubt themselves. So as we get older, people will say similar things like, no, you didn't feel that. And you go, oh, no, maybe I didn't. But actually we did. We experienced exactly that. So we have to have our realities validated and not put down. So the share is 5 minutes. We listen to. No one can comment on my share and say that it's wrong. They can only share about their feelings, their experiences. There's also no blame. In my sharing, I have to speak in the first person. I felt, I saw, when this happened, I experienced. Not like, when you did this, you made me blah, blah, blah. That's all blame. That's not a share. That's just like a whole, that's again another boundary violation. No one made you anything. We must take responsibility. We must teach our children at a very early age to take responsibility, because that's the biggest problem in society. No one wants to take responsibility for their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, nothing. So we've got to learn to take responsibility back. The world's not going to change. We're going to change one person at a time. That's ourselves.
Yeah, I've just written.
Simon, that's really deep, really deep. Been taking notes, just like Nadia. I can see her like doing stuff over on her end. But yeah, that's 5 minutes of uninterrupted share without any interruption, without any commenting about what you're feeling, just sharing and not even comment. And then when the other person gets to share, that's such an important moment for families to come together. I could just envision it. I mean, like, how many families, and this is something I do, how many families do we know, and if you can ask yourself, come together when the kids are over 10, 11, 12 years old and have dinner together? I know I had this real estate agent that I was working with, right? They never sat at a table and had dinner together. So Johnny was having dinner in his room and Sally was having dinner in her room. There was no connection. The dad didn't know when the excursions were on. He didn't even know how well they were doing at school, etc. And as a result, there was no connection.
Yes.
When he come home from work, because he was so run down and tight from his real estate, open homes and the auctions that he was doing at night, kids were walking on eggshells. They didn't know how to approach it. It was always grumpy and miserable, but we were able to change that. But that's such a great tool, Simon, that I'm going to implement. Take what you've shared, and I've written it down, and implement it in those similar scenarios. And to be honest with you, not just in family settings, but in just relationship settings. It could be boyfriend and girlfriend that are going through some turbulence, and that even in my own life here at home. But thanks for that. I really like what you had to say.
It's like 5 minutes of interrupted sharing, and it's got to be set in concrete. So it's like, we do this at this time every week. Every week we do it at this time every week. And I'll tell you an interesting statistic, that kids with ADHD, they're doing this study on kids with ADHD, and one of the biggest things they found out was, one of the biggest things that helped kids start to change their behavior was the fact that mum, if I ask you a question, right, so they do this thing that mum and dad had to spend a certain amount of time with their child to make an impact, and it made a significant impact. How much time do you think per week that parents had to give their children in order to make a substantial impact on their lives, to change their behavior with kids with ADHD?
Well, as a parent, and my parents don't have kids don't have ADHD. I'm just saying as a parent, I'm not saying that I've kicked the goal and I'm doing the right things, but I think I'm doing the right thing. I'm on the right track.
Yep.
Is it enough? I don't know, but I tell you what, I know that I spend lots of time with my kids. I'm over 5 hours a week with my kids. I'm talking about. I sometimes spend 4 or 5 hours a day with that one kid. If I take my son to soccer, if I take my daughter to the park to train with, so I probably spend more time with my son than I do with my daughter, but I spend time with him. And I mean,
Bro, how much time do you reckon? How much time do you reckon you need to make a difference?
Per day?
Per day, per week?
Per day, at least a minimum of half an hour to 45 minutes each.
Okay, I'm going to tell you what they did. So this was called uninterrupted play. So the kid picked the activity, and the parents were not allowed to change it. They had to go with the child. They couldn't interrupt their play at all. They had to do exactly what the child wanted. It wasn't what the parents wanted. They weren't allowed to interrupt. The only thing that the parent could interject for was if it was a safety concern. Other than that, the parents had to just go with whatever the kid said. And what made the most difference to that child it's called uninterrupted play, not playing with the kid, but being super present with the child doing what they want, was half an hour a week, and they saw complete reversals of some of this stuff. Half an hour a week. So it's not about the time that we spend with children, it's about the way we spend time with our children. And can you imagine if someone's with you for half an hour and says, I'm here for you and with you completely in body, mind, and spirit. Whatever you want to do, we're going to do, and we're going to do it together. And especially a parent, imagine that.
But are we talking about hearing you speak, Simon, are we talking about kids, children from 5 below, 7 below? Are we talking about adults as well?
Even older kids, mate. Even older kids. Yep. In particular, young kids get a lot different, but half an hour of undivided attention once a week that the kid always knew was coming was enough to make significant changes. Because you think people are with their children, but they're not.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt for a second and just say something. So this is, I say, a huge problem, and you might be able to relate to this and have something to say about that. I have heaps of parents who are either divorced or even still married and that, who are well off, who are quite happy to just dump their child at my gym, have no interest of what he's doing. The kid's got ADD, he's got borderline Asperger or whatever, right? No confidence. Self-esteem, even without some of the kids that don't have the autism or Asperger or anything like that, they just have no confidence. They're quite scattered in that. But the father's never beside the ring supporting them, taking photos, videotaping. You look at some of the other kids that are well adjusted, and I'm not saying this in a negative way or towards anybody, but who are just a little more well adjusted and have got their stuff together. Their parents are beside the ring. They're watching. They're videotaping. They're coming along and motivating them. They're getting involved. They're offering encouragement where the other parents are nowhere to be seen, and they're quite comfortable giving them like $30 a day for pocket money, $20 a day for like lunch money and that.
Yeah.
Never a cooked meal, sending them to personal training and stuff like that, and just dumping all their problems onto a trainer, onto somebody that they think that will make up for absent dads and absent mums, which is, you really can't put a price on that time or anything on the absentee of mums and dads.
Yep. And that's all what we're looking for always, even as adults. So we have absent mums and dads and they don't approve of us or aren't there for us. We'll pick partners that are absent from us to heal our childhood wounds. And that's what happens. What we recreate, the abandonment we had as a child, we recreate that as an adult. I know that's definitely true for myself. And I'll also, even if I'm not, and especially if I'm not being abandoned, I will create circumstances in my life that will make someone want to abandon me because, again, I've got the I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough going on. So if someone does love me, if I haven't done the work on myself to know that that's my core belief, I'll act in a way that will push people away from me. Yeah, it's really important to understand that.
Yeah.
So that abandonment that goes on that you see translates to broken down relationships as an adult. And that's what we're seeing in parents right now. They had the abandonment as a child. They've grown up. They're still adult children right now that have children, and they can't. The other principle of that is that we can't give what we don't have.
And you know,
So they were never given and shown love. They can't pass that on. If they weren't really present with their own parents, they really can't be present for their own children. They pass on, say, for example, what we do is we quite often play the other side of the coin. So mum and dad was really angry and they never gave me anything. So I'm going to be the exact opposite. I'm going to be really passive and calm and give my kids everything. But it's just as abusive as the person who didn't give them anything. In fact, it could be even more abusive because the child thinks my parents were perfect. They did everything for me. They never yelled. They never did anything. But it wasn't. But what they also demonstrated was it's not okay to show feelings. It's not okay to be human. You know what I'm saying? So it can be just as abusive. And so the kid grows up thinking that the world owes me things and I get everything that I want and I'm the center of the universe, and that just continues on and on and on. So it's just as abusive, but it's covert versus overt abuse.
You know what's really amazing as a parent that I'm seeing now, Nadia and Simon, is their transition. And I look back and I look at myself. I don't know if you guys can remember these when we were about 13, 14, 15 especially, and we're transitioning into adults. We're going through puberty and that. And we're no longer becoming kids. We're becoming young adults.
Yes.
Boys discover girls, girls discover boys. You know, you've got this thought pattern that goes in your head. What am I going to do for work? What's going to happen when I leave school? Now, that thought pattern is going through my son's head because he's in year 11. Now, I see the transition and I see the difficulties today that children, young men, young women, young people face.
Yeah.
And as a parent, it is worrying, but at the same time, it's kind of enlightening for me to kind of embrace that. And I feel elated to be part of that. I feel so much love and such a strong connection to talk to them about career decisions and just being on this journey with them, especially with my son now. My daughter's going through that. You know, I know there's certain things with women that mums are more closer to women than dads are with puberty and that time of the month, etc. You know, and yeah, that whole journey is just incredible, you know, for a parent.
Yeah, awesome.
I was literally just thinking of the situation, the generational, you know, if you don't have present parents and then you go on to be an present parent. So my parents were both very busy, so busy that they couldn't deal with us. But I became the parent to my brother and sister.
Yes.
My brother literally got engaged and he had a beautiful fiance, and stuff happened. She decided to turn it off. Like, it was just whatever, it ended. And my parents kept coming back to my brother saying, "What happened? Why did you put up with her for so long?" And she's a human person. I said to, you know, I even said to her after, "Look, I'm sorry it didn't work out with you. Obviously it was whatever." And my brother literally said that his whole reasoning behind putting up with her, as he said, was, "I didn't have a role model. Like, you basically put up with yourselves." Like, they were always arguing, but they still supported each other. So he thought that that's the way it was supposed to be. And when we were cavemen 255 years ago, we were climbing in trees. We didn't know what was right and wrong. So as long as we can eat something and make sure we didn't die, that was our whole life purpose. So yeah, it's definitely evolved since then.
Yeah. So true. So true.
And so moving on, do you have any magical resources that you like to refer back to, whether in your own life or with your clients? We like to have a little collection of books or websites or anything that you can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. Look, I mean, some of the key. So, you know, when I went to rehab 22 years ago, I went in for sex and love addiction and codependency. And codependency, people don't really understand what it is. It's a real big buzzword. Codependency. Everyone likes the word codependency. So I'll give you the simple definition of what codependency is. So codependency is the active control and avoidance of myself and others and control through avoidance. So I'll say it again. It's the active control and avoidance of myself and others, and the active control through avoidance of myself and others. So, for example, I don't like something, I'll try and control the situation. I'll make sure everything's organized. I'll plan it 6 months in advance because I'm fearful. So I'm trying to control people, places, and things, either overtly or controlling it by completely avoiding it. So one of my coping mechanisms is being late. So it's probably, instead of trying to control the whole circumstance, I'll just want to run away from it. That's my default nature. I want to run away. So I've had to do a lot of work on myself so that I don't just abandon things, that I can stay present in the tough time. Other people will just scream and yell and get angry and try to control everyone, and if it's not the way they like it, they'll just continue to go crazy until they get their way. Or if they can't get their way, then they have a big meltdown. So and then also controlling through avoidance. So, for example, instead of trying to overtly go around things and make people do what you say, what you do is that if you don't do something, that people will do it because they're scared. For example, one of the biggest ones that I believe, controlling through avoidance. So, in other words, we don't want to deal with our problems in our life. So people will threaten suicide. That's a big way to control. I can't cope with life anymore. I want to escape it. I can't take on the responsibility, so I'm going to end it. And that's one of the biggest ways that we do that, right? And so we just think codependency is I'm relying on somebody, but it's way more than that. We try to control people because we don't feel safe in the world, or I don't feel safe in the world. So codependency is the root cause of addiction because it has to do with self-esteem and a whole bunch of other things as well. So, yeah. So I would say if you want to, the resources that I would say are really good, because most people don't have money. When you're really at this kind of level where you've gone through, when you're at rock bottom, a lot of people have lost jobs, they have no money. The only thing that they have is maybe a bit of time. I would recommend the 12 steps, and I would recommend most people to go into what's a group called Codependence Anonymous, because it really deals with the childhood trauma that we've experienced, and it helps us to start reframing it and to get strength and independence back. It's based on the 12 steps of AA, or Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a spiritual program for a spiritual problem, and I think that's really the start. So maybe Codependence Anonymous or Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, because sex and love addiction is the primary addiction of our world right now. It's not one person that really doesn't struggle with it. And what I mean by that is, so for men, it can be they're addicted to sex or pornography. And for women, it's generally love. So relationships, the idea and fantasy. So sex, love, and fantasy are all really major drivers. You think about everything, all the advertisements on TV and magazines and internet, and the access to internet porn, and the availability and the freedom to just access it at any point. This is what's stealing. This is the biggest addiction in the world by far, and no one's really talking about it at all. And everyone struggles with it because we're all addicted to this idea of love is going to save me. And it's not the truth at all. Love will bring up our issues. Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful thing to have in your life, but it will also bring up everything at the forefront. So, yeah. And so the books that I would highly recommend is Facing Codependency and Facing Love Addiction by Pia Mellody. A really good book that when I first started in recovery was a book it's a really old book because it helps you deal with pain. Pain is inevitable and it's part of life and you can't avoid it. And it's called The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck.
The road what, sorry?
Road Less Traveled.
I thought you were going to say for a moment that the Road of the Peaceful Warrior. I read that book.
I haven't read that.
You've read it too?
No, I haven't. I haven't read that. No. Another book that I think is really, really important, because stories are the biggest things that create our problems. We get stuck in the past or the future, and we're very, very in a fast-paced lifestyle. We're really very, very rarely present in this present moment. And generally, this present moment has everything available to it, and there's nothing wrong right now. So in this moment, everything is okay. But 5 minutes ago, I could have been in the biggest turmoil of my life. But right now, when I'm here and now, everything is okay. And it's called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's I think one of the most pivotal books in my life to really, I really started to dabble with the concept of being present and the power of this present moment. But that book has really reshaped my thinking at such a profound level. And he's got another book. I can't remember what it's called. He's got a few books, but there's another one. There's a sequel to The Power of Now. So I recommend both of those books by Eckhart Tolle as a starting point.
Yeah, I actually just done a book review of that. So, I did have it in my pile just here, but
yeah,
amazing book, and The Road Less Traveled is amazing as well. So I'll get you the Amazon book link in the below.
So interesting how you shared the power of now is absolutely fine, but it is so heavily influenced by what has happened in the past, whether what event may disturb you the night before or that morning. That could be an argument with a loved one, could be a disagreement with somebody on the road, a road rage. It could be anything, but how that affects you is incredible. And obviously how we entertain it and how we're how we are at that certain moment. I know that day that years ago, back in COVID, I traveled to visit you at your white collar boxing club in North Sydney, and I came over there with Brendan, and you were getting rid of some of your old equipment, and I bought some bikes and
that's right.
Stuff, a couple of medicine ball, and I can't remember what else. I bought a rower or something. I can't remember what I got from you, but I was driving there, and Brendan was driving me there in his van. And as we were driving there, we were talking about something that was quite spiritual, quite deep. And Brendan was sharing stories with me, and I was sharing stories with him, and we were talking and talking. And this phone rang, and it was this person that keeps ringing me about like some sort of marketing or something. Like I can't remember what it was. And I picked up the phone. I go, fuck, this person's calling me again, and I answered and I said, sorry, mate, I can't talk, too busy. See you, mate. And I put down the phone, and Brendan turned around to me about half a minute later as we're driving. He said, mate, I understand you're a bit frustrated because this person keeps ringing you and that you don't even know these people, but they're just ringing you out of the blue. But sometimes it's important to get your state of mind to a point where, like, those things do come up. Your mind is not preoccupied by previous events or stress or anything like that, that you're able to handle that situation in that moment in time. Like, thanks for calling. I'm not really interested. I'm a bit busy right now, and have a great day. And that's it. And ever since, and that's all it took. Ever since, it was just a friendly conversation that I had from a friend, a guy that I was training at my gym. I mean, I'm not saying these instances do not come up because I'm human, but I make the effort to be more mindful of in these situations.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can finish on this because one of the things is our mind is generally out of control. So the mind especially is out of control. I don't have control over it most of the time. And one of the things that I do is another little exercise that I believe is really powerful when, for example, life is overwhelming and my mind is racing in the middle of the night, or something's just happened, a conflict has just happened, and I'm elevated and I'm feeling stressed or anxious, is to sit down for 5 minutes. Again, it just takes 5 minutes. Within a minute or two, you're already feeling different. But you just actually speak out loud, not in your mind. You actually have to speak it out. Because again, if you're just saying it in your head, you're in your mind again. It's no good. You have to speak. But you see everything that you see, hear, and feel in that moment, and it becomes limitless. For example, right now, I will just say I can hear my voice speaking. I can feel the vibration in my throat and in my body. I can feel my bottom against the seat. I can feel a bit itchy on my nose. I can feel myself touching my face and my beard. I can hear the different tonalities of my voice. I can see the red curtains in front of me and the different lighting in my van. I can see the kitchen cupboard. That's just an example. So to go as much internal and external, and then if I go to I can hear a small whir. So you have to be becoming really present about what's going on all around you in the most strange of circumstances, noticing colors, shapes, and it becomes infinite. Even if you were to stare at your hand, what you would notice will become infinite in the observation, and it brings you back to this present moment where you're at and and pulls you out of what's going on in your mind. It's a really wonderful drill.
I love that. It's very hypnotic as well. I use that a lot with my clients who
I do, yeah, wonderful.
wandering minds. So especially if I have problems focusing and my ADHD, I've got ADHD and an Asperger's person in the room in my house, and it's crazy. One paces and the other one grooms, and the other one, yeah. So it's quite interesting. But when you can say, well, what can you feel on your feet right now? And they're like, oh, okay, they're looking at my feet now. Or what's on my cup? And they literally look at what's on that, and it just keeps them distracted from the problem that doesn't really exist.
Yeah.
Simon, I took some notes down, but I have my own view of it, and it may be a bit different from yours, but it's something that I believe.
Yeah, tell me.
And I believe that for the most part, we cannot control most of what entertains our minds. So the thoughts, the stimulants, the visuals, the pictures that come into our mind, we cannot control. But what we can control is how we behave and how we act upon it. And if we're mindful of that, and this is when people are like, for example, people who are rapists or people who are compulsively, they're doing something consistently, and it becomes such a bad habit, and they're doing it like watching porn. Porn's a great example. The stimulants that they get, like as a male, and I'm talking only as a male, and I think you can weigh, but how many times do you have these sexual urges and stuff like that? How many times do you get these desires and stuff like that? But you know your role as a husband or as a partner,
Yeah.
the person that you identify yourself with. So that control mentally and the way you are wired really has a lot to do with the behavior and the way you conduct yourself. And I truly believe that sometimes at night we sleep and we have all these dreams, we have all these thoughts during the day, or that guy cut me off, what a wanker. Next time someone cuts me off, I'll give him the finger or something like that on the road, whatever it may be. Yes, those are the thoughts that come into your mind, but how you behave and how you entertain that all comes down to how mindful you are. And that's a skill. That's a skill that is really a skill, you know?
Yeah. It is, mate. It is. And it's a practice and takes time, and it takes a lot of mistakes to get there.
Yeah. And we've all made lots of mistakes.
Yeah.
Simon, just before we finish off, we do want to ask you, how do people get a hold of you if they want to contact you once they see this Zoom?
Yep.
How do they?
Yeah, so it's best to get contact with me through social media at the moment, through Facebook, so Simon Mitchell. And also I have an Instagram page called Simon's Fortunate Life. That's probably the easiest for now. And I'm about to start a group called Men of Presence, talking about, we talked tonight about things. And I'm also going to start, not yet, probably in about 2 months' time, I'll be starting family constellations practices. I'm in the process of setting my life up and moving, so I don't have time right now to run those constellation workshops, but I'll be starting them again in 2 or 3 months' time. But Men of Presence will be an online group which will be helping men have safe space to talk and to share, which there's a lot of places at the moment where people are doing things, but there's not a lot of places where people can really get to express what's going on in their day-to-day lives, and also start to learn these tools that we're talking about and implement them in their lives in a real practical manner with other men, and really taking responsibility, because a lot of support groups also is all like, poor me, poor me, poor me. No, it's not poor you. You're just the same as everybody else, but we're here for you, and learning to take responsibility and being present in your life is the most important thing. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. What do you reckon, Nadia?
Definitely. And I was just thinking about a friend of mine who's a male in a situation, and he says, "Poor me, poor me." And I think there's a lot to say about what's happening in the world. Like there's so much support for women, and with DV goes both ways.
Yeah.
Hard time getting custody.
That's a talk for another discussion for another day.
All new talk, and just the trauma of that sort of stuff. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about these workshops. Maybe I'll pretend to be a guy for a couple of days. So I'll do.
So, yeah, absolutely. And so, what's the goal of them? Why do men need to be present? So they need to be present for their partners and their families, right? So masculine is the rock, and the woman and the feminine is the water that washes over the rock. And so presence brings that stability of emotion, stability to sit in that uncomfortability, to be the support for the feminine, and also for the children. So it's we always want our kids to regulate. The kids will be going off, and the parents are going, "Shut up! Stop yelling." Well, what kind of example is that for the child? It's like, okay, I'll breathe first. I'll regulate my emotion down, and then I can say, "Hey, darling, please stop."
Yeah.
You know what? I'll try and remember that next time I yell.
Yeah, the man, it's imperative. You want a peaceful household. It's imperative the man takes a breath, sits with it, holds it, regulates himself, and then he speaks. It's really important. That pause is really, really important. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is. It is.
We'll have to get you back on
So true.
that whole topic in itself as well, because
Yeah, it is. All right.
there's
It's
so
really,
much
really
to
great
say about
discussion.
that. In saying that,
some,
do a book plug as well, and it's called John Medina wrote a book about the brain and how we function, and the old brain, and it's so amazing that we have a lot of freedoms in this world. And 250,000 years ago we lived in trees, and I keep saying it, and people think, why do you say that? But it's true. We lived in trees. Men were supposed to catch the birds, light the fires. Women were supposed to pick the berries and feed the kids. But we have a purpose, and it doesn't matter whether it's in nowadays where you're gay, LGBT.
Yeah, nothing's changed.
Yeah, nothing's changed. You need a masculine or a feminine. It just needs that. Anyway, I'm going to basically put all of this information in the comments below, and I'm sure Dad would like to have a few words about his footprint retreat that's coming up.
First of all, Simon, really good to have you here tonight and catch up with you. I've been meaning to catch up with you in person. I'm sure we'll get to do that sometime.
Yes,
let's make it more often. But good to listen to what you have to share and your knowledge and on this subject today. It's Nadia, always great to see you as well. And as Nadia was saying about our upcoming footprint retreat, we've got one coming up later on this year, and we're going to be putting dates out there for that and sharing it with everyone. But for now, I just wanted to concentrate on next week. Next week, Nadia and I are going to be running this Zoom session again, and we're going to be talking about fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. As a sufferer of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue for 34 years, I've learned to navigate through the turbulence, and it's been such an incredible journey during the time where I've done all these different courses and threw myself into all these different places, clinics, doctors, hospitals that I've gone to, and testings that they've done to me, from cortisol tests and so many different things, because I just wanted to get well. And I realized that there is no quick fix for neither fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. And to understand all that, I would love to invite everybody next week to hear about my journey and to what I've learned in finding my baseline about both these things, especially chronic fatigue. And I look forward to seeing you all on next week on Tuesday night at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Time. It's going to be a great session. I've got a lot to share about my journey and what I believe has helped me through that journey. Things like a morning routine and what I actually do in the morning routine, what I actually do in the night routine, and all the other things that I do. But once again, Simon, it's really good to see you here today and catch up with you. And Nadia, you too, as always. And to all our viewers out there, have an amazing evening. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, mate. Thanks, Nadia.
Thank you, really.